Have you ever been told a lie that was so absurd after a while you started to believe it? I used to do night shifts at a 7-Eleven, and one of the guys I worked with would always bring his 10-year-old daughter in with him, but according to him, she wasn't his daughter. She was his cover for looking like a struggling middle-aged dad, while secretly being an undercover CIA agent gathering intel on an organized Swiss crime family. At first, it seemed like a joke. The girl would stay out back and play on her tablet, while he would go out to give her spy glasses and teach her fighting moves he'd learned from Karate Kid. It was kinda cute. But then about 3 weeks in, things started getting weird. I walked into the break room to grab my phone and saw the girl digging through her backpack looking for some chips. She didn't see me and pulled out what looked like a real handgun and slapped it on the table. I froze in the doorway immediately, and I think she heard me because she quickly started shoving the gun back into her bag. Then she looked up at me with these cold eyes that didn't match her age. "It's a fake gun, relax. But my brother had served in the army. I swear that pistol looked real." I told her dad about it instantly, and his response was to bring the girl out back with him to talk. I don't know what was said. All I know is she never brought the gun again. Then a week later, I witnessed something that made my skin crawl. Victor, the undercover agent, suddenly tensed up while we were stocking shelves and started watching the parking lot intensely. Without saying anything, he reached into the cereal box display beside him and pulled out a knife he'd hidden there. He kept it low behind the counter. Hours later at 2 a.m., this well-dressed guy wearing an expensive suit walked in. Even stranger, he didn't buy anything, just walked straight up to Victor and said something in Swiss German. Victor responded fluently while clutching the handle of the blade under him. They went back and forth for maybe 30 seconds, completely calm, before the man finally bought a slushie and left. Victor wouldn't look at me for the rest of the shift and barely said 2 words. Starting the next day, Victor disappeared for 3 shifts straight. No calls or texts or anything. But here's the thing that really messed with my head. His daughter still got dropped off each night by an unmarked black sedan. Different driver each time who'd walk her to the door and watch her go inside. When I asked her where Victor was and why she was here alone, she just said, "Dad's sick and I'm not supposed to say." I was tempted to call CPS, but Victor would personally call me sounding ill. He explained that he didn't want his daughter at home around him to pass on the illness. I didn't buy it. Either way, on the 3rd night without Victor, this man I'd never seen walked into the store at 1 a.m. The 10-year-old girl saw him through the security monitor and immediately ran out from the break room. They talked right there in the chocolate aisle, and she kept glancing back at me while they spoke in Swiss German. At one point, she subtly glanced at me. The man turned slightly to half stare for a few seconds before leaving without buying anything. I was seriously creeped out, and the next day, my apartment got broken into while I was at my day job. Nothing was stolen, but someone had searched through everything. My drawers were pulled out and my closet was ransacked. They left a note on my kitchen counter written in German. I brought the note to work that night and Victor was finally back. When I showed him the note, his face went white. He asked me exactly what happened, and when I told him about the man visiting and showed him the camera footage, his expression shifted to pure rage. Victor stormed into the break room where the girl was playing her game. Through the security camera, I watched him yelling at her. He was gesturing wildly and she kept shaking her head. After about 5 minutes, he came back out looking shaken. "You need to lay low," he said. "They think you're involved now." "Who's they?" His mouth suddenly shut. "It doesn't matter. What matters is, I joked too much about the CIA thing, and now the wrong people think you're part of the operation." The girl came out and interrupted us. "Tell him the truth, Dad." Victor snapped at her. "Not yet," in this voice I'd never heard him use. He grabbed my shoulders and made me promise that after tonight's shift, I'd quit and find a new job. I figured I'd just listen to him. Later that night, I found myself taking out the trash for the last time as a 7-Eleven employee, when suddenly, the same Swiss man came back. And he had 2 other guys with him. They cornered me outside. One grabbed my shoulder while another asked if Victor ever mentioned Zurich. I played dumb and said I just worked here and he'd never said a thing. The main guy leaned in close and said, "We'll be back tomorrow. 7 p.m. Have better answers." I walked back inside on shaking legs and somehow made it through the last 2 hours of my shift. Every time the door chimed, I jumped, expecting those 3 men to come back early. Victor's car sat in the parking lot the whole time, just idling there with his headlights off. I could see him through the windshield, staring straight ahead, and in the back seat the girl's small shape was visible against the glow of her tablet. At 3 a.m., I locked up the store with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and Victor pulled out of the lot without a word or wave. The drive home took forever because I kept checking my rearview mirror at every intersection, convinced I'd see a black sedan following me. My apartment felt wrong when I got there, even though nothing looked different. I checked the locks 3 times, wedged a chair under the doorknob, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep came in short bursts between checking my phone for the time, watching the hours count down toward 7 p.m. tomorrow. By 6 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee, making lists of what I needed to do. The decision felt clear in the gray morning light. I wasn't going back to that store tonight, and I needed to get ahead of whatever was happening before those men showed up looking for me. At exactly 8 a.m., I called Andre, my store manager, and told him I needed emergency time off starting immediately. He sounded annoyed at first, asking if this was really an emergency or just a schedule conflict. I said men had threatened me at the store last night and I didn't feel safe coming in. His tone changed fast after that. He asked if I was okay and whether I'd called the police, then said he'd mark me off the schedule, but corporate would need a formal incident report by the end of today. I spent the next hour at my laptop, methodically downloading everything I could access from the store's security system. The footage showed the 3 Swiss men from last night pretty clearly, at least from certain angles. I took screenshots of every timestamp where they appeared, making sure to capture their faces and the parking lot shots. Then I got out the German note from my apartment break-in and photographed it from multiple angles, using my phone's camera to get the handwriting as clear and sharp as possible. The whole time, my hands felt steadier than they had all night, like having concrete tasks was keeping the panic at bay. Around 10 a.m., I couldn't stop myself from texting Victor. I typed out a message demanding to know what was really going on and why people were threatening me over whatever he was involved in. His response came back 20 minutes later. Just 4 words at first, then another text right after. The messages made my stomach drop because they confirmed these people had the capability to monitor phones. I sat there staring at my screen, realizing I'd been thinking of this as some weird misunderstanding that could be cleared up with explanations. But if they had surveillance tech, this was way more serious than I'd wanted to believe. I started pacing my apartment, phone in hand, trying to decide what to do next. The smart thing would be calling the police, but what would I even say? My apartment got broken into, but nothing was stolen, just a note in a foreign language. My coworker might be involved with criminals. Some well-dressed men asked me questions in a parking lot. It sounded insane even in my own head, like paranoid rambling about spy movies and international crime. I walked back and forth across my living room for almost an hour, wearing a path in the carpet, feeling the walls get closer with each pass. But finally I decided that having something official on record was better than nothing, even if the cops thought I was crazy. I pulled up the police department website and found the online reporting system. It took me another hour to fill out everything about the break-in, the threatening note, and last night's confrontation with the 3 men. At the end, there was a box to request an in-person follow-up, and I checked it without hesitation. The confirmation email came through right away, saying someone from the detective division would contact me within 24 to 48 hours. That timeline felt like forever when I only had until 7 p.m. tonight, but at least it was something. I couldn't just sit in my apartment waiting and thinking, so I grabbed my keys and drove to the hardware store across town. I spent 20 minutes walking the aisles, picking out a new deadbolt that looked harder to pick, a security bar to wedge under my door handle, and rubber wedges to jam in the gap under my door. The cashier gave me a look like he was wondering what I was so scared of, but I didn't care. Back at my apartment, I spent 2 solid hours installing everything, following YouTube videos on my phone, and making sure each piece was as secure as I could get it. The physical work felt good, gave my hands something to do besides shake. When I finished, the door felt more solid and I felt slightly less like a sitting target. My phone rang in the afternoon and Andre's name popped up on the screen. He said corporate had heard about the incident and they needed my formal report for their records and insurance purposes. I sat down and spent the next hour writing everything out in the most boring, factual way possible. I listed dates and times, described what the 3 men looked like and exactly what they'd said to me, mentioned Victor's strange behavior without speculating about why. I left out anything about CIA agents or Swiss crime families or smuggling operations, just stuck to workplace safety concerns. It read like a boring incident report, which was perfect, even though it barely scratched the surface of how dangerous this felt. While I was reviewing all the security footage again, trying to make sure I had everything saved, I noticed something I'd completely missed before. The Swiss men had been really careful about avoiding the main entrance camera when they arrived, keeping their faces turned away or staying just out of frame. But when they left, one of them walked right through the parking lot camera's view. I could see his face clearly for almost 3 full seconds, plus his expensive watch and even part of the license plate on their sedan. These guys were professional, but not perfect, and that one small mistake might actually matter if the police took this seriously. At 6 p.m., my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, and my heart stopped for a second until a woman's voice came through. She said her name was Detective Phil Dougherty, and she'd reviewed my online report from this morning. Her tone was professional and calm, not dismissive or skeptical like I'd feared. She said she wanted to meet with me in person tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the police station and asked me to bring the physical note and any video files I had. I agreed immediately, feeling this tiny thread of hope that maybe someone official was actually taking this seriously. She asked a few quick questions about whether I felt in immediate danger or if I needed patrol cars sent to my location tonight. I told her about the 7 p.m. deadline the men had given me, and she said she'd have officers increase their presence near the store around that time. After we hung up, I sat on my couch holding my phone, feeling like maybe I'd done everything I could do for now. I sat there staring at my phone for maybe 20 minutes, trying to convince myself I'd done enough. At 6:30 p.m., My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and my stomach dropped when I saw the message. "Don't be at the store at 7, please." It was Victor. I could tell from the way he wrote it, and the fact that he was actually begging me to stay away scared me more than anything else he'd said. I texted back asking what was going to happen, but the message just sat there with no response. I watched the minutes tick by on my phone. 6:35, 6:40, 6:45, each one feeling like it took forever. My new deadbolt and security bar suddenly felt like they weren't nearly enough protection. At 6:55, I couldn't take it anymore and pulled up the store's security camera feed on my phone, even though I knew I probably shouldn't still have access to it. The screen loaded slowly, showing the empty aisles and the evening clerk behind the counter doing something on his phone. I kept refreshing it every few seconds, watching the timestamp creep towards 7 p.m. At exactly 7:03 p.m., 3 figures walked through the front door, and I recognized them immediately. The Swiss men moved straight to the counter, and the clerk looked up, clearly surprised by something they said. I watched him shake his head and point toward the schedule board on the wall behind him. They talked for maybe 2 minutes, the clerk looking more and more uncomfortable, before they turned and walked back out without buying anything. My phone buzzed again 30 seconds later with a text from Andre. "3 men just came asking for you. Told them you weren't scheduled. They left." I typed back a quick thanks and immediately started thinking about what this meant. They knew I wasn't there tonight, which meant they'd be looking for me somewhere else. I spent the rest of the evening packing up anything I couldn't afford to lose. My laptop went into my backpack first, then my important documents like my birth certificate and social security card that I kept in a folder. I grabbed about $300 in cash I'd been saving and stuffed it in my wallet. I called Raphael, this guy I knew from my day job who I'd helped move furniture a few months back, and asked if I could store some stuff at his place for a while. He said sure without asking too many questions, which I was grateful for because I didn't know how to explain any of this. His apartment was across town, a solid 40-minute drive, and I took a weird route to get there just in case anyone was following. Raphael met me at his door and helped me carry everything inside, putting my boxes in his hall closet. While I was there, I also went through my phone settings and changed my lock screen to remove my address and full name, just showing my first name and a generic background photo. I set up 2-factor authentication on my email, my bank account, and every other app I could think of. It felt like I was preparing for something way bigger than just 3 angry guys, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to get worse before it got better. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, unable to stop my brain from replaying everything over and over. The girl's face when she'd pulled that gun out 3 weeks ago, those cold eyes that didn't match her age at all. The Swiss man speaking to Victor in their language while Victor gripped that hidden knife. The way my apartment had been searched so carefully, every drawer pulled out, every closet opened. Victor's panicked voice saying, "They think you're involved now," like I'd done something wrong just by working the same shift as him. Every tiny sound in my building made me jump. A door closing somewhere down the hall sounded like someone breaking in. Footsteps above me from the upstairs neighbor felt like someone coming for me. I checked my door locks 4 times between midnight and 3 a.m. and finally gave up on sleep completely around 5 a.m. I made coffee and sat on my couch watching the sun come up through my window, feeling exhausted but too wired to actually rest. My phone rang at 8:30 a.m. and I almost dropped it when I saw it was Detective Dougherty. She asked me to confirm our 9 a.m. meeting and told me to bring the German note and any video files on a USB drive. Her voice was calm and normal, like she was just scheduling a regular appointment, and somehow that helped me feel slightly less crazy. I gathered everything into a folder, including printouts of the security footage, timestamps, and screenshots of the Swiss men. I found an old USB drive in my desk drawer and copied all the video files onto it, labeling it with the dates. I left my apartment at 8:40 a.m. and drove to the police station, arriving at 8:45, even though our meeting wasn't until 9. I sat in my car for a few minutes, clutching my folder, trying to organize my thoughts about how to explain everything without sounding paranoid or insane. The interview room was small and plain, with just a table and 3 chairs. Detective Dougherty sat across from me with a notepad and went through everything in order, asking me to start from the beginning. I told her about working with Victor for several weeks, about his weird CIA story that seemed like a joke at first. I described the girl and how she'd been there almost every shift, playing on her tablet in the break room. I told her about seeing the gun 3 weeks ago, about the well-dressed Swiss man who'd come in speaking German with Victor. I explained Victor's 3-day disappearance and how the girl kept getting dropped off by different drivers in unmarked sedans. I showed her the video footage of the apartment break-in timeline and gave her the German note in its plastic bag. I described being cornered outside by the 3 men and their threat about coming back at 7 p.m. Detective Dougherty took notes the whole time, occasionally stopping me to ask specific questions about dates or descriptions. She was skeptical about some parts, especially the CIA cover story, but she didn't act like I was making things up or wasting her time. After almost 2 hours, she assigned me a case number and said she'd look into Victor's background and try to track down the vehicle registrations from the footage. When I left, I felt like at least someone official believed me, even if I was still scared about what might happen next. Before I left the station, Detective Dougherty suggested I get the German note translated independently to make sure we understood exactly what it said. She wrote down the name Thea Raymond on a piece of paper and told me she was a German teacher at the community college who sometimes helped the police with translation work. I called Thea from my car and explained that Detective Dougherty had given me her name. She said she had a break between classes that afternoon around 2 p.m. and could meet me in her office if I could get there by then. I agreed immediately and plugged the community college address into my phone. My phone rang again while I was driving away from the station, and I saw it was Andre. He said he needed my written incident report for corporate and their insurance records. I pulled into a parking lot and opened my laptop, finding the document I'd written yesterday. I read through it one more time to make sure it was just the facts with no speculation about CIA agents or crime families, then emailed it to Andre and copied corporate HR. He sounded stressed when he called back to confirm he'd received it, and he mentioned that corporate was really concerned about armed men coming into the store asking for employees. There was this tone in his voice like he was asking without actually asking if I was bringing dangerous problems to the workplace. I could feel my job security slipping away, even though I was the victim in all of this, but I didn't know what to say to make it better. The drive to the community college took about 25 minutes, and I spent the whole time checking my mirrors. I took a complicated route with a bunch of extra turns just to see if anyone was following me. About 2 blocks from the college, I noticed a black sedan a few cars back that seemed to be matching my turns. My heart started racing, and I slowed down at a yellow light, watching in my mirror to see what the sedan would do. It suddenly turned off onto a side street and disappeared. Maybe I was being paranoid, and it was just someone going the same direction. Or maybe whoever was driving it was better at following people than I was at spotting them. Thea's office was on the 2nd floor of the language building, a small room with bookshelves covering every wall. She was probably in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. I sat down across from her desk and pulled out my phone to show her the photos I'd taken of the German note. My hands were shaking as I handed her the phone, and she noticed, giving me a concerned look before focusing on the screen. She studied the note carefully for several minutes, zooming in on different parts and occasionally writing something down on a pad of paper. Her expression got more serious as she read, her eyebrows pulling together. She finally looked up at me and read her translation out loud. "Stop interfering. Zurich is not your concern. Who do you report to?" The words hung in the air between us, and I felt my stomach turn over. The phrasing wasn't just a threat to leave something alone, it was asking who I worked for, like they thought I was part of some organization or operation. Thea pointed out that the handwriting showed specific dialect markers consistent with educated Swiss German speakers, probably from the Zurich area specifically. She said the phrase, "Who do you report to?" suggested they thought I was part of some official operation, rather than just a random convenience store worker. This changed everything because it meant they weren't just warning me off, they were actively trying to figure out if I was a threat to whatever they were doing. I thanked Thea for her help and walked back to my car with my phone already out. Sitting in the parking lot, I opened my email and typed a message to Detective Dougherty with the subject line, "Translation of German Note." I attached the photos of the note and copied Thea's translation word for word, then added her notes about the dialect markers and the Zurich connection. My hands were still shaking as I hit send. I sat there staring at my phone for maybe 10 minutes before it rang with Detective Dougherty's number. She got straight to the point and told me I needed to stay away from the store tonight and every other night. Her voice was firm when she said she'd arrange for a patrol car to drive by around 7 p.m., but she warned me they couldn't do much more than observe without evidence of an actual crime. I asked if the threatening note counted as evidence, and she explained it was more complicated than that because it was vague enough to have different interpretations. The frustration in her voice matched what I was feeling, this sense of being trapped by rules and procedures while actual danger was right there in front of us. That evening, I was back in my apartment pacing between the kitchen and living room. The clock on my microwave showed 6:47 p.m., and I couldn't stop checking it every few minutes. My phone was in my hand, and I kept refreshing my messages even though I knew Andre wouldn't text until something happened. At 7:14 p.m., my phone buzzed and I nearly dropped it. Andre's message was short and direct. "Those 3 men came back. Asked for you again. I told them you quit. They didn't buy anything. Just left." I read it 3 times, feeling this weird mix of relief and fresh panic. On one hand, I wasn't there and nothing bad happened. On the other hand, now they knew I was actively avoiding them, which probably made me look even more suspicious in their eyes. If they really thought I was some kind of handler or informant, my sudden disappearance after their threat would just confirm their suspicions. My phone rang at 8 p.m., and Detective Dougherty's name showed up on the screen. She said the patrol officers had seen 3 men matching my description hanging around the store entrance around 7 p.m., but without probable cause they couldn't stop or question them. I could hear the frustration in her voice, the same feeling I had about being stuck between believing something dangerous was happening and being limited by what the law actually allowed. She told me I needed to start varying my daily routines and avoid predictable patterns. Don't leave for work at the same time every day. Take different routes. Park in well-lit areas. Tell someone my schedule each day. The advice made sense, but it also made the danger feel more real, like I was actually being hunted and needed to think about basic survival tactics. At 10 p.m., my phone rang again from a blocked number. I almost let it go to voicemail until I heard Victor's voice and it stopped me cold. He sounded completely different from his usual mysterious persona, exhausted and genuinely scared. The CIA thing was supposed to be a joke, he said, and there was this defeated quality to his words that made my stomach turn. I made it too convincing, and now the wrong people think you're my handler or an informant. Part of me wanted to scream at him for dragging me into this mess with his stupid lies, but mostly I just felt sick. His admission that it was all fake should have made me angry, but instead I just felt this cold certainty that I was in real danger because of someone else's bad decisions. I demanded to know about the girl, who she really was, and why she was always with him. Victor went quiet for a long moment before saying she was safer at the store than at home, which wasn't really an answer at all. I pushed harder, asking what that meant and why a 10-year-old needed to be kept safe at a convenience store in the middle of the night. He just kept saying he couldn't explain it all right now and that I needed to trust him. My distrust hardened into something cold and certain right then. Whatever was really going on, he'd been lying from the very beginning, and that girl was caught in the middle of something dangerous that had nothing to do with spy games or CIA covers. The next morning, my phone rang at 9 a.m. with a number I didn't recognize. A woman identified herself as Violet Jensen from CPS and said she'd accepted my report for investigation. Her tone was professional, but I could hear genuine concern underneath when she said she'd attempt to make contact with the child at the store location I'd provided. She asked if I had any other information about where the girl lived or went to the school, and I had to admit I knew almost nothing concrete. I didn't even know the girl's real name. Violet said these investigations take time and that she'd keep me updated, but I could tell from her voice she was as frustrated as I was by how little solid information there was to work with. That night, I was doing my usual security check before bed, making sure the new deadbolt was locked and the security bar was in place. That's when I noticed my doormat was shifted slightly from where I always positioned it. I'm careful about stuff like that now, and the rubber backing leaves these faint marks on the concrete outside my door. The marks didn't line up anymore. Someone had been at my door, either testing it or checking if I was home. I grabbed my phone and took several photos of the mat position and the misaligned marks, then sent them to Detective Doherty with a message explaining what I'd noticed. The violation crept under my skin like insects, this feeling that my safe space wasn't safe at all. Detective Dougherty called first thing the next morning and went through a list of practical safety advice. Vary my commute times. Use different routes to work and home. Park only in well-lit areas with security cameras if possible. Tell someone my schedule every single day so there's a record if something happens. She was treating this like I was a potential target, which I guess I was. The conversation was brief and matter-of-fact, but I could hear the concern she was trying to keep professional. She couldn't protect me 24/7, and we both knew it. I was on my own for most of this, just trying to stay unpredictable enough that whoever was watching me couldn't establish a pattern. The next morning, my phone rang with Andre's name on the screen, and I answered expecting him to ask about my schedule. Instead, his voice had this tight quality I'd never heard before, like he was choosing every word carefully. He said corporate had been calling him about the security incidents at the store, and they weren't happy about armed men coming in repeatedly asking for employees. He talked around it for a minute before finally saying, maybe it would be best if I formally resigned instead of taking more time off. The way he said it made the meaning clear without him actually saying the words. I was a problem they wanted gone, and this was the polite way to make it happen. I told him I understood, and he sounded relieved that I wasn't going to fight it. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone feeling this weird mix of anger and acceptance because I was losing my job over something I literally stumbled into by accident. That afternoon, I drove to meet Thea at the same coffee shop near the community college. I brought the photo of the note again and asked her to explain more about the specific phrasing. She studied it for a minute, then looked up and said the phrase, "Who do you report to?" in this context, suggested they thought I was part of an organizational structure. She explained they weren't just threatening me or warning me off, they were actively trying to figure out if there was a bigger operation they needed to worry about. Which meant every time I denied knowing anything or claimed I was just a store clerk, it probably sounded exactly like what an undercover agent would say. The more I insisted I wasn't involved, the more suspicious it made me look. Thea could see the fear on my face, and she touched my hand briefly before pulling back. She said I needed to be extremely careful because these people were clearly sophisticated enough to think in terms of handlers and informants and organizational structures. When I got home that evening, I opened my laptop and started drafting a formal resignation letter. It felt surreal to be writing it, losing my job over something I had zero control over. I kept the letter simple and professional, just saying I was resigning effective immediately due to personal circumstances. I emailed it to Andre and copied corporate HR, then saved a copy to my desktop for my own records. At least this way I could control the narrative slightly. I quit rather than being fired for bringing danger to the workplace. The distinction probably didn't matter much in practical terms, but it mattered to me. The next morning, I had an email from Detective Dougherty asking if I could meet her for another conversation. She said she'd found some background information on Victor that she wanted to review with me. We met at a different coffee shop this time, one closer to downtown instead of near the police station. She slid into the booth across from me and pulled out a thin folder. She explained that Victor had a history with law enforcement, nothing major enough to charge him with, but definitely enough to be on their radar. He'd been questioned multiple times about cross-border smuggling between Canada and the US over the past few years. Every time they questioned him, he had explanations that were just plausible enough that they couldn't charge him, but the pattern was clear. The CIA story was complete fiction, but he was absolutely involved in something illegal. Detective Dougherty closed the folder and looked at me directly. She said I needed to accept that Victor had been lying from the very beginning, and that girl was caught in the middle of whatever criminal operation he was running. Later that afternoon, Violet from CPS called with an update. She said she'd gone to the store during what would have been Victor's normal shift time, but the girl wasn't there, and the current employee working had never seen her. Violet left her business card and information with the clerk, asking them to call if the child showed up. I gave her Victor's full name and the exact times he usually worked, hoping it would help her make contact. She thanked me, but I could hear the frustration in her voice that matched my own. The bureaucracy moved so slowly when I knew that girl was in danger right now. Violet assured me the case was active and they were doing everything they could, but I hung up feeling helpless. I needed to return my work uniform and keys to the store, so I waited until mid-afternoon when I knew it would be busy with customers. I called Raphael and asked if he could come with me, and he agreed immediately without asking questions. He waited in his car in the parking lot with the engine running while I went inside. The day manager was behind the counter, and I handed her my uniform in a plastic bag along with my keys and name tag. The whole interaction took less than 3 minutes. My heart was pounding the entire time, my eyes constantly scanning the store and parking lot for any sign of the Swiss men. But nothing happened. No one approached me, no one was watching from the parking lot, no black sedans appeared. It was almost anticlimactic after all the buildup of fear. As I was leaving through the back hallway toward the employee exit, I nearly collided with the girl coming out of the bathroom. We both froze in place, and for a moment neither of us moved or spoke. Then she quickly pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand and whispered, "Don't be home tonight," before hurrying past me toward the break room. I was so shocked I almost dropped the paper. By the time my brain processed what had just happened, she was already gone around the corner. I shoved the paper in my pocket and walked quickly out to Raphael's car, my hands shaking. Once we were in Raphael's car, I pulled out the paper and unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a crude, hand-drawn map, showing what looked like my apartment building and the surrounding streets. There was a red X marked directly on what had to be my unit based on the position in the building. Underneath in child's handwriting it said, "They're coming. Don't be there." My blood went cold as I stared at the map. This 10-year-old girl had just warned me about a planned attack on my home. Raphael saw my face and asked what was wrong. I showed him the map without saying anything, and watched his expression change from confusion to alarm. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Dougherty immediately. My voice was shaking as I read her the note and described the hand-drawn map. She was quiet for a moment, then her voice came back firm and clear. She told me not to go home tonight under any circumstances. She said to leave my lights and TV on to make it look like someone was there. She would have patrol cars increase their presence in my area, but she was honest that they couldn't maintain 24-hour surveillance on my apartment. I thanked her and hung up, then turned to Raphael. I asked if I could stay at his place tonight, and he agreed immediately, hearing the fear in my voice. He said I could stay as long as I needed and not to worry about it. From Raphael's apartment that night, I accessed the security camera I'd installed in my own hallway using my phone. I sat on his couch with the phone screen glowing in the dark, watching the empty hallway outside my door. Around 11 p.m., a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway and walked slowly toward my door. It wasn't one of the Swiss men I'd seen before, but someone new. He tried my doorknob carefully, testing if it was locked. Then he examined my lock closely, bending down to look at it from different angles. After that, he just stood there in front of my door for what felt like forever, but was probably about 5 minutes. Finally, he walked away back down the hallway and disappeared from view. I sat there staring at my phone screen, feeling sick. The girl's warning had been completely accurate. They really had come for me tonight, and I was only safe because a 10-year-old had risked herself to warn me. I was grateful I'd listened to her, but the reality was sinking in that I was essentially homeless now, too scared to go back to my own apartment. The next day, Violet called with an update that made my stomach turn. She'd gone back to the store and saw the girl being dropped off by a black sedan with windows so dark you couldn't see inside at all. Violet walked right up to the driver's side and knocked on the window, asking to speak with whoever was inside about the child's welfare. The driver didn't roll down the window or say anything, just sat there for maybe 10 seconds while Violet stood next to the car. Then he suddenly put the car in drive and took off with the girl still in the back seat, leaving Violet standing in the parking lot. She documented everything and wrote up a full report for her boss, but she sounded So frustrated on the phone because without knowing where the girl actually lives or what school she goes to, CPS can't do much more than try to catch them at the store. I listened to her explain the system's limits and felt completely helpless, like we were all just watching this kid stay trapped in whatever situation she was in. A few hours later, my phone rang from a blocked number, and I almost didn't answer it until I heard Victor's voice. Except this time, he sounded totally different from his usual calm, mysterious act. His voice was shaking and high-pitched as he practically yelled into the phone, asking if I'd lost my mind bringing CPS into this whole thing. I felt my own anger rise up and snapped back that a 10-year-old shouldn't be hanging around a convenience store at midnight while strange men drop her off in unmarked cars. I told him he needed to explain what was really going on right now, or I was done with all his lies and games. There was this long silence on the line where I could hear him breathing hard, and when he finally spoke again, his voice sounded completely defeated and tired. He started talking, and this time I knew he was finally telling the truth because everything sounded too specific and too real to be made up. He said he'd gotten himself into debt with people back in Zurich who were connected to smuggling stuff across borders, and the debt had been growing for about 2 years now. The girl wasn't his daughter and wasn't even related to him in any way. She was connected to some mid-level guy's family, but Victor wouldn't say exactly how or why, just that he was supposed to keep her visible and safe as part of some kind of insurance deal. The whole CIA agent story was supposed to be a joke that explained why she was always with him without having to tell people the real reason. He kept going and explained that the girl served two purposes at the same time. Her being around kept certain dangerous people from doing anything to him because she was valuable to them somehow, but it also meant Victor had to do whatever they told him to do. The Swiss men who'd been threatening me were trying to figure out if Victor had turned into a snitch or if I was some kind of cop or federal agent running him as an informant. My accidental involvement in everything had made the whole group paranoid, and now both Victor and I were seen as possible threats to whatever operation they were running. I hung up with Victor and immediately called Detective Dougherty to tell her everything he'd just admitted. She listened carefully while I repeated all the details about the Zurich debt and the smuggling connections and the girl being used as leverage. When I finished, she was quiet for a second before speaking in this very firm voice, telling me absolutely not to try any kind of rescue mission or intervention with the girl. She said this was now possibly an interagency case involving child trafficking or exploitation, and she needed to make referrals to federal investigators who handle that kind of thing. Her warning was super clear. She said I was just a regular civilian who was already in danger, and trying to play hero would only make things worse for everyone, including the girl herself. After that call, I spent the rest of the afternoon going through all my online accounts and security settings. I changed my phone number and only gave the new one to Raphael, Detective Dougherty, and my parents. I set up a brand new email address that had nothing to do with my name and turned on password managers for all my accounts. The whole process made me feel like I was going into witness protection, even though I hadn't actually witnessed any specific crime. I just stumbled into something dangerous by complete accident and bad luck. That evening, I was leaving a grocery store near Raphael's place carrying 2 bags when this guy bumped into me really hard in the parking lot. My first thought was pickpocket, so I immediately checked my pockets, but my wallet and phone were both still there exactly where they should be. Then I heard this whisper right next to my ear in accented English. Just one word said quietly. The word was handler, and then the man kept walking away without looking back at me or slowing down at all. I stood there frozen in the parking lot with my heart beating so fast I could feel it in my throat, finally understanding that it wasn't a robbery attempt or an accident. It was a message telling me they were still watching me and still thought I was running Victor as some kind of informant. The next day, Andre called and his voice had this sad quality to it that I'd never heard before. He told me Victor hadn't shown up for his last 3 shifts and wasn't answering any calls or texts from the store. Corporate was moving forward with terminating him for job abandonment since he'd basically disappeared without any explanation. Andre said he'd actually liked Victor despite all the weirdness, and now the whole situation had just fallen apart completely. I thanked him for letting me know, and we both kind of acknowledged, without saying it directly, that this was probably the last time we'd ever talk to each other. My brief career working night shifts at that 7-Eleven was officially over for good. Late that night, I couldn't sleep, so I pulled up the store's security camera feed on my laptop one final time before my access got shut off. I was just scrolling through the footage when I saw the girl being dropped off alone again around midnight. I grabbed my phone and immediately sent the timestamp and screenshots to both Violet and Detective Dougherty. The sedan driver was visible for just a couple seconds as he walked the girl to the door, and I could see it was definitely a different person than the previous drivers I'd seen before. They were rotating who brought her, which meant this wasn't just some casual arrangement, it was organized and planned out systematically. The next morning, Detective Dougherty called with a request that surprised me. She asked if I would be willing to wear a small audio recorder if I had any future contact with Victor or the girl, but she made it super clear this was completely voluntary and only if I felt safe doing it. She said multiple times that I should never put myself at risk and could say no without any problem. I agreed right away because I understood that any evidence I could gather might actually help with both the criminal investigation and the CPS case about the girl. 2 days later, I'm checking my mailbox at Raphael's building, and there's a prepaid flip phone sitting on top of my electric bill. My hands start shaking as I pick it up because nobody should know I'm staying here except Raphael and Detective Dougherty. The phone buzzes in my palm and I nearly drop it. One text message shows on the screen in plain letters. Park on Elm Street. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. There's no signature and no other context, but I know immediately it's about the girl. I take a photo of the phone and the message and send it straight to Detective Dougherty before I even go back inside. She calls me within 10 minutes and we talk through whether I should actually go or not. Her voice stays calm and professional, but I can hear the concern underneath. She points out that a public park in the middle of the day is relatively safe compared to other meeting spots they could have chosen. She says she'll have officers in regular clothes positioned around the area where they can watch without being obvious. The decision is mine, but she thinks the risk is manageable if I'm careful. I spend the entire night lying awake in Raphael's guest room, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide if this is brave or just incredibly stupid. Every time I close my eyes, I see that girl's face and those cold eyes that don't match her age. By morning, I've made my choice. At noon, I'm sitting on a bench in Elm Street Park, positioned exactly where the security cameras can see me clearly. I picked a spot near the playground where families with kids are playing and watching. The spring air is warm, and there are joggers passing by every few minutes. My phone is in my pocket with Detective Dougherty's number ready to dial. I've been here for maybe 5 minutes when the girl appears from behind the tall playground equipment and walks straight toward my bench. She moves with this sense of purpose that makes her look older than she is. She sits down next to me without any greeting or small talk. Her hand reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out a small black flash drive. She places it directly into my palm and closes my fingers around it. Give this to your cop. Her voice is completely flat, like she's reading from a script. Don't talk to Dad. He'll just lie more. I'm struck again by how much she seems like a tiny adult trapped in a kid's body. Before I can say anything back to her, I notice movement in my side vision. 2 men are standing about 50 yards away near the parking lot, and their attention is locked on our bench. They're not the Swiss men I saw at the store, but their body language screams surveillance. One of them has his phone out like he's taking photos. My heart starts pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. I stand up slowly and start walking toward the area with the most families and the clearest view of security cameras. The girl doesn't follow me at all. When I glance back over my shoulder, she's already walking in a completely different direction toward the street. I want to call out to her or make sure she's safe, but Detective Dougherty's instructions were clear. Don't engage. Don't create a scene. Just get the evidence and get out. I don't go anywhere near my car in the parking lot because those 2 men are still watching. Instead, I walk 2 full blocks to a busy shopping center with lots of people coming and going. I call a rideshare from a completely different pickup location than where I'm standing. During the ride, I call Detective Dougherty and tell her everything that just happened. My words come out fast and jumbled, but she stays patient and asks clarifying questions. She tells me to come directly to the police station right now. I clutch the flash drive in my pocket like it might explode or disappear. Whatever information is on this tiny piece of plastic, that little girl thought it was important enough to risk meeting me in public. The driver drops me off at the station entrance and I practically run inside. Detective Dougherty meets me in the lobby and takes me back to an interview room. She pulls out an evidence bag and I drop the flash drive into it. She explains that it's going to take time to analyze properly because they need to image it and check for any hidden software before they can actually view what's on it. She sits across from me with a notepad and starts asking detailed questions about everything. What was the girl wearing? What were her exact words? How did she seem emotionally? What did the 2 men look like? Where exactly were they standing? I describe everything I can remember, including how calm and purposeful the girl seemed, like she'd been planning this meeting for days. Detective Dougherty's expression gets more troubled as I talk. She says the girl's behavior suggests she's been living in this dangerous situation for a long time. Kids don't act that calculating unless they've had to learn survival skills way too young. That night, I'm back at Raphael's apartment trying to eat dinner when my phone rings from a blocked number. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. Victor's voice comes through and it's shaking so badly I barely recognize it. You shouldn't have taken that drive. His words are rushed and panicked. You don't understand what you're involved in now. I start to respond, but the line cuts off completely before I can get a single word out. When I try calling back, the number shows as disconnected. I immediately report the call to Detective Dougherty, and she says they're actively trying to locate Victor for questioning, but he seems to have completely disappeared. She uses the phrase "gone to ground," which makes him sound like a criminal on the run. The next morning, I walk out to Raphael's parking lot to head to a job interview, and all 4 of my tires are slashed. Not just flat, but cut deep with something sharp. There's no note this time and nothing else damaged, just the clear message that they know exactly where I'm staying now. I file another police report, and Detective Dougherty logs it as part of the ongoing investigation. She calls me after reviewing the report, and her voice is more serious than I've ever heard it. She strongly suggests I consider temporary relocation again, maybe stay with family in a different city for a few weeks until things calm down. The constant moving and fear are exhausting me, but the alternative is so much worse. Violet calls later that afternoon with another update that makes me want to punch something. She went back to the store with police accompaniment this time, hoping to finally make contact with the girl or the sedan driver. But the driver saw the police car and immediately drove away with the girl still inside before Violet could even approach. Her voice sounds as frustrated as I feel. We're both trapped by procedures and limitations while a child stays in obvious danger. She assures me the case has been escalated now, and multiple agencies are involved. Federal people are looking at it. But progress feels maddeningly slow when I know that girl is still out there somewhere. Andre sends me a final email the next day with my termination paperwork and information about my last paycheck. He's removed me from the schedule permanently and processed my resignation as official. There's a brief personal note at the end thanking me for my work and saying he's genuinely sorry things ended this way. I appreciate the gesture even though it doesn't change anything. Mostly I'm just relieved to have one less connection to that store and everything that happened there. My brief career working night shifts at a convenience store is completely over. 2 weeks pass without any contact from anyone. No threatening calls, no suspicious cars following me, no visits to Raphael's apartment. The silence is almost worse than the threats because I don't know what it means. Then Detective Dougherty finally calls with news about the flash drive. It contained financial ledgers and internal messages all written in German. Everything relates to smuggling operations with dates and amounts and locations. The files have been forwarded to financial crimes investigators and possibly federal agencies. She can't share specific details with me, but her tone suggests this is way bigger than a local police matter now. The girl handed me evidence of an actual organized criminal operation. I spent the next 3 days apartment hunting online from Raphael's couch, scrolling through listings and calling landlords. Most places wanted first, last, and security deposit up front, which ate into my savings fast. But I finally found a studio sublet across town in a building with a security door and cameras in the lobby. The landlord barely asked questions when I explained I needed a short-term lease, just ran my credit and handed over keys 2 days later. I gave the address only to Raphael, Detective Dougherty, and my parents, making them promise not to share it with anyone. The rent was $200 more than my old place, which hurt without the 7-Eleven income. But sleeping through the night without jumping at every sound seemed worth the cost. Moving took a whole weekend using Raphael's car and another friend's pickup truck. I packed everything into boxes and bags, checking my mirrors constantly during each trip between apartments. I varied my routes every time, taking different streets and highways, doubling back occasionally to make sure no one followed. By Sunday night I was exhausted but settled into the new place, with new locks installed and my go bag packed in the closet just in case. The building felt safer with its security system and other tenants around, not like my old isolated apartment where anyone could lurk outside my door. I started job hunting the next week, applying to warehouses and retail stores and anywhere that didn't require night shifts. The thought of working overnight again made my stomach turn, remembering those hours at the 7-Eleven when everything went wrong. After a month of interviews and rejections, I finally got hired at a small warehouse across town that handled electronics distribution. The pay was lower than the convenience store, almost $2 less per hour, but the schedule rotated every week between morning, afternoon, and evening shifts. My new boss explained they like to keep workers flexible, which meant I'd never have the same hours 2 weeks in a row. The unpredictability actually made me feel safer since anyone trying to track my patterns would have a harder time. My coworkers were mostly quiet guys who kept to themselves, loading boxes and scanning inventory without much conversation. I didn't mention anything about my situation, just showed up on time and did my work. To them, I was just another warehouse worker trying to pay bills, which was exactly what I wanted. 6 weeks after I handed Detective Dougherty that flash drive, she finally called with an update. Her voice was careful and measured as she explained that federal agents running a parallel investigation had made one arrest on smuggling charges, though she couldn't share details about who or what specific charges. The larger group seemed to be lying low, or possibly moving their operations elsewhere, which meant the immediate pressure had decreased somewhat. She emphasized this didn't mean I was completely safe or that I should let my guard down. I still needed to vary my routines, check my surroundings, and maintain the security measures I'd put in place. The call left me feeling slightly relieved, but also frustrated that there wasn't more concrete information about what happened to Victor or the girl. One evening about a week later, my phone rang from a blocked number. I almost sent it to voicemail, remembering all the threatening calls before, but something made me answer. There was silence for a few seconds, just breathing on the other end, and I was about to hang up when a child's voice spoke. She just said 2 words, "Thank you," and then the line went dead before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, my hands shaking slightly, hoping desperately it was the girl, and that she was somewhere safer now. I immediately called Detective Dougherty and reported the call, but she said there was no way to trace a blocked number or confirm who it was. Still, I chose to believe it was her, that my stumbling involvement had somehow helped get her out of that dangerous situation. Raphael noticed I wasn't handling things well despite the decreased threat level. I was still jumping at loud noises, checking my locks multiple times before bed, taking different routes home from work every day, even when it added 20 minutes to my commute. He suggested I talk to someone professional about everything that happened, and I finally admitted he was right. I found Harlow Bentley through my insurance network, a therapist who specialized in trauma and anxiety disorders. Our first session was awkward, as I tried to explain the whole bizarre situation without sounding paranoid or crazy. I told her about Victor's fake CIA story, the girl with the gun, the Swiss men, the break-in, the threats, all of it spilling out in a jumbled mess. Harlow just listened carefully, taking occasional notes, and when I finished, she didn't seem fazed at all. She said what I was experiencing, the constant checking and anxiety and difficulty trusting people, was a completely normal response to abnormal circumstances. Over the next 2 months, I worked with Harlow on managing what she called hypervigilance. We practiced breathing exercises and grounding techniques for when the panic hit. She helped me understand the difference between reasonable caution and obsessive checking, though the line still felt blurry sometimes. I still kept that go bag packed in my closet with cash, copies of documents, and a change of clothes, and Harlow said that was fine if it helped me feel prepared. I still checked my mirrors obsessively when driving and varied my routes home from work. But gradually, the panic attacks became less frequent, dropping from multiple times per week to maybe once every 2 weeks. I had whole days where I didn't think about Swiss men or German notes or that little girl's cold eyes staring at me across the store. The progress was slow but real. 3 months after everything started, I was driving to Raphael's place for dinner, and my route took me past the old 7-Eleven. I hadn't been on that street since I quit, deliberately avoiding it. But this time I was running late, and it was the fastest way. The store looked completely ordinary in the evening light, just another convenience store on a commercial street with cars pulling in for gas and snacks. Through the window, I could see a new clerk behind the counter, some young guy I didn't recognize, ringing up customers like nothing had ever happened there. The parking lot was empty of black sedans, no well-dressed Swiss men, no little girl with a tablet sitting in the break room. The building looked smaller and more mundane than it did in my memory, and I realized how much my perception had been shaped by fear and danger. It was just a regular store again, nothing special or threatening about it. I'm doing better now, though better is relative and some days are definitely harder than others. I'm more careful than I used to be, more aware of my surroundings when I walk to my car or enter my building. I trust my instincts quicker when something feels wrong, like when someone stands too close or a car seems to follow the same turns I make. The situation never got a neat resolution with all the answers I wanted. I don't know exactly what happened to Victor or whether he's in jail or hiding or dead. I don't know where the girl ended up or if she's actually safe or just in a different dangerous situation. I don't know if the Swiss operation was actually disrupted by the flash drive or if they just moved their business elsewhere. But I'm alive. I'm employed at a job that pays my bills, and I'm slowly learning to sleep without checking the locks 3 times before bed. That's not the ending I would have chosen if I could write my own story, but it's the one I got, and I'm learning to accept that sometimes survival and small improvements are enough. That's my version, but I already know half of you have better takes. Drop them in the comments so we can keep the discussion going. I'll be reading through them later, like always. You guys make this channel what it is.